Good evening. Good to see you all here tonight. Glad to be back. I'm in much better shape than I was Sunday night. I'm aware of my surroundings, and I'm very conscious at this moment. I've caught up on some sleep, so I had to ask Jessica about the sermon Sunday night. I said, did that come out all right? A little bit of a blur for me after summer camp, but I'm much more well-rested and excited to be back home. Camp is a big thing on my plate. Got that out of the way, and I can sort of relax to a certain degree. But good to see you guys here. In just a few moments, Shane's got our invitation tonight, and following that, we're going to sing. Looks like number 344. I didn't know if that was last week's number. Okay, Brian's on top of it. Number 344 after the invitation, and Jimmy Young will dismiss us in prayer before we head off to our classes. Just a few announcements to go over and review from the bulletin. If you didn't pick up a copy of the Exhorter, I really want to commend Andrew Romine for his article that he wrote. A very excellent article written about one of my favorite hymns. Now on the back we have a list of announcements. There's a lot we try to keep up to date, and so that's a really good way to know what's going on and who could use a phone call at any given time, or some encouragement or some help perhaps. Folks to remember in our prayers. Of significance is the college list. I believe Cypress is probably his last. He's heading back to school this week, right? Right, yeah, and then looks like Adrian Kitt is probably headed back, and I know we had Jordan with us quite a bit over summer too, and so they're headed back to Florida. We get Tristan for a little bit longer, but and we see him throughout the school year, but he's headed back to school in about a month. So keep those young folks in your prayers. College is it's one of those times of life. A lot of learning happening, a lot of independence compared to living at home. So a lot of reason to pray and hope they get good experience and good education. Thursday night class at my house. We've taken a few weeks off, but as I said, we're back. We're back from Oregon. We're back on schedule for tomorrow, so we're still in 2 Corinthians on Thursday night. If you'd like to join us, that's at my house at 7 o'clock. Do the elders have anything else that we need to bring to the attention of the congregation? Okay. Shane?
Hi. Today at work, I had a presentation I had to give, and I knew who my audience was going to be, and it kind of gauges your level of preparedness and kind of what you're going to talk about. And the group that I was speaking to, it didn't have to prepare a whole lot. They probably didn't care anyways. But nevertheless, I had to present just a couple of different things. But what I prepared for it yesterday and came into this morning understanding what I had to kind of do, and about 15 minutes before the presentation started, an executive showed up that I was not prepared for, and I'm like, oh no. This was actually like my boss's boss, so I was like, oh shoot. I'm going to talk about something that's pertinent to my department, and I'm got the guy who's anyways. So I was not really prepared to go into level of detail as I would have been otherwise. It all ended up okay, at least I think it was, but I'm driving home today. I got the invitation, so I'm just thinking about kind of how I can relate that or my day to kind of an invitation. And this is what I thought about was a verse in the Bible talks about the Lord is coming like a thief in the night. And it talks about preparedness. And there's two verses that I thought of. One was in 1 Thessalonians. The one I want to bring your attention to is in Revelations. It's in the 16th chapter, and it starts in verse 15. It says, "Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his clothes on, so that he will not walk around naked, and men will not see his shame." And I'll just stop there. But behold, I am coming like a thief, and blessed is the one who stays awake. Talking about preparedness and salvation, and relate that to ourselves. And death is something we all face. I don't like to talk about it. I personally don't care to, but something we have to be prepared for, and our souls are in jeopardy. And so when I ask you tonight if you are ready for that day, I hope your answer is yes, and you are prepared. And if you are not, you have an opportunity to become so. And we offer the invitation for those who, if you need to be baptized, we can provide that for you. If you've been struggling and you need some prayers for the congregation, we can help you do that also. We're here to help you, whatever we can do to facilitate your needs. I ask you, if you would, come forward while we stand and sing, and we'll help you.
Patiently drawing near, entrance within demanding, whose is the voice I hear. Sweetly the tones are calling, open the door for me. If thou wilt heed my calling, I will abide with thee. Door of my heart I hasten, thee will I open wide. Though he rebuke and chasten, he shall with me abide. Sweetly the tones are calling, open the door for me. If thou wilt heed my calling, I will abide with thee.
Let's pray. Our Holy Father in heaven, we're thankful that you've brought us all together here tonight to study your word. We thank you for health good enough to be here and for each one we see around us that gives us strength and encouragement. We know that we all struggle with various types of worries and types of difficult challenges in life, and everyone here has something that they're going through, and we thank you that you provide help throughout every day of our lives as we go forward. And we thank you that there are brothers and sisters here who have prepared lessons for us tonight, who have spent their time getting ready to teach us from your word. We pray that as we go to our classes, that you would help us to have honest hearts, help us to be courageous enough to make changes in our thoughts and in our actions as we study your word. We pray that you would please be with those who are struggling with illness, and we ask that you would please bless this congregation. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
In just 1 second, I'll have everything ready to go from a mechanical standpoint. Yes, I did. You didn't think I'd hear that, did you?
What do you think then? No, I get it. We can hear some things. So you have to be careful.
That's okay, I deserved it. All right, we are studying the Proverbs. If you look up on the screen, we have the definition of a proverb, which is something we haven't even looked at in a while. A statement of a single fact that represents similar facts. In other words, you're having something being set forth that has application over a broader area. Now, if we look at the outline of the Proverbs, we are presently in the third Solomonic group, chapters 25 through 29. And if we ask what this group is about, or rather what it's like, it's a lot like looking at the first two Solomonic groups. In this group, what are the two key terms that we're emphasizing? The two key words, like and but. You either have an antithesis, something is like this, but this is true, or you have a like statement. A person that does this is like. So like and but are the two key words of this particular grouping. Now, in this grouping, we've looked at the chapters, and we've kind of been looking for some key things that we can put together with some kind of a theme that makes it a little more memorable. I think the one so far that is most memorable is this, how to get along with people. At least this was the one wherein we had the best attention. If we're looking at how to get along with people, we learn to speak well, we don't brag, we have the soft tongue, we don't overstay our welcome, we're reliable, we don't act in an inappropriate manner, and we learn to deal well with people that we may not be necessarily getting along with. Now, last week in chapter 26, we had three groupings. There were three types of misbehavior that we discussed, and what were they? Give me one. The fool. Give me two. The sluggard. Give me three. The whisperer. The talebearer. Now, for instance, on the fool, if you look at the 10th verse, like an archer who wounds everyone, so is he who hires a fool or who hires those who pass by. That's just one of the traits of the fool that we looked at. And we talked about the concept that sometimes there are people, you try to do them a favor, you try to help them, and sometimes you just can't. You end up hiring a fool, and what happens to you? Hurts your business. That's almost always the way it works out. The sluggard, if we look at the 13th verse, the sluggard says there's a lion in the road. A lion is in the open square. What's the problem with the lazy guy? He's always got an excuse. The lion is just an example of the kind of excuse you get from the guy that just doesn't want to get out of bed and go to work in the morning. There is a lion in the street. Now, it's a ridiculous excuse, but to somebody who doesn't want to go to work, one excuse is just as good as the next one. Now, the whisperer. We were talking about the whisperer in verse 22. The words of a whisperer are like, we'll write this down, this is where we left off, dainty morsels. The words of the whisperer are like dainty morsels. What's that mean? Dainty morsels. Give me an example of a dainty morsel. A cookie. Oh, a cookie is good. What else? A chocolate eclair.
Oh, that's better though.
Oh, Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And we could go on and on and on and on with the dainty morsels. To some people, their answer might be just a really good bite of steak, cooked just right. And that would be accurate. When you think of the dainty morsel, it's something that you just see it and crave it and want it, and it goes down easy and is really enjoyable. The words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels. Gossip is like dainty morsels. All right? That's the way it seems. What is it really? We'll just put the term out here. Gossip. Now, let's ask this. How many of you have trouble defining what gossip is and knowing the difference between gossip and just conversation? Do we sometimes have trouble knowing the difference? Sometimes. But I really think that deep down in our heart of hearts we know the difference. Because when it's gossip, usually there's a little, well, maybe I shouldn't say this kind of thing. And if there's a little of the maybe I shouldn't say this kind of thing going on, you probably know. Now, gossip seems like a dainty morsel. What is it really? Let's look at verse 23. Like an earthen vessel overlaid with silver dross are burning lips and a wicked heart. All right, what do you get from that? An earthen vessel. An earthen vessel. What's an earthen vessel made out of? Clay. But if you overlay it with a little bit of cheap silver or phony silver, what does it suddenly look like? Looks like it might be worth something. But the silver really is just a what? It's a, did I spell veneer right? It's a veneer. It's a facade. When you talk about gossip, it's all it is a facade. It's a veneer. If you think of it as being a just a dainty morsel. If you have a veneer or a facade, what's the purpose of putting up you're building a house or remodeling a house and you throw up some kind of veneer on a wall. What's the purpose of putting it there? Make it look a lot better than it actually is. It's a crummy wall, but we're going to make it look good. A facade is something that's there to look good. Like an earthen vessel overlaid with silver dross are burning lips and a wicked heart. Here is what it really is. Gossip seems really neat, but it's a veneer. It's a facade. And what it covers up is a wicked heart. Okay, don't raise your hand. You've all heard gossip. Somewhere along the line, we've all probably engaged in gossip. Maybe going on right now, for all I know. We have kind of developed a mindset that laughs it off a little bit, because after all, it's always there. You always got to deal with this kind of thing, so, oh well, don't get upset about it. What is it really? It's wickedness. It's not a, oh, no big deal kind of thing. If we talk about gossip among the people of God or gossip within a congregation, the facade, the veneer might make it seem like it's okay. But if you're a gossip, you're a wicked person. Now let's go back to the text. Verse 24. He who hates disguises it with his lips, but he lays up deceit in his heart. A disguise. All right, we're talking about some kind of a disguise that's covering something up. Now, if a person is a gossip, how do you disguise that? How do you make it seem like it's not really gossip? Oh, that's the best one. Bless his heart. Standard joke, everybody knows it. That's the sorriest excuse for a member of the church I've ever seen. Bless his heart. If you say bless his heart, that's supposed to negate the bad thing you said. Look at verse 25. When he speaks graciously, do not believe him. All right, how do you disguise what you're doing? You speak graciously. How do you speak graciously in gossip? Oh, you say things like, well, he's really a good person. There's this little issue here. Or blah, 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 blah. Bless his heart. Supposedly that means you have good intent. You're just trying to help. You're just trying to point out some kind of flaw so he can better himself. It's a disguise. For what? When you look at verse 24, he who hates disguises it with his lips. It is a disguise for hate. Does that make that sound bad? We're members of the Lord's church. Surely nobody hates anybody. Is that true or not true? Can hatred exist among the people of God? What is maybe a really good indicator that somebody hates somebody? I'll pick on Robert tonight. What would be an indicator to you that I hated Robert? I've always got something bad to say about him. If I've always got something bad to say about Robert, bless his heart, you might get the idea. Pretty soon would you see through it? These are the kinds of things that we need to stop and think about, because sometimes when we get into gossip, we do act like it's not that big a deal. If you have seen congregations destroyed in your lifetime, if you've ever been in a situation where you've seen a congregation that just really blew up, usually before it ever gets that far, there's usually some kind of gossip campaign that goes on, where people are talking about their brother and maybe saying things that they shouldn't, or solving problems in ways that they shouldn't. In verse 26, though his hatred covers itself with guile, his wickedness will be revealed before the assembly. Okay. His hatred covers itself with guile. What is guile?
Deceit.
It's deceit, duplicitous person. All right, we look at all these terms talking about the gossip. Seems like dainty morsels, but it's a facade, it's a disguise, it's covering up what you're really thinking about. You really have a wicked heart, you hate somebody, and you're trying to make them look bad. Now you might say within yourself, well, I don't really hate that person. Well, you're treating them like you do, so you may as well. One thing about it in verse 26, though his hatred covers itself with guile, his wickedness will be revealed before the assembly. All right, his wickedness will be revealed before the assembly. What's that mean? Is he going to keep it secret?
No, the whole church will know.
How many gossips live with the idea that nobody's ever going to find out what I'm really like? Do they? Your own personal experience. I know about you, but ones I have met were oblivious to the idea that anybody was ever going to see through what they were doing. And what's the truth of the matter? Sooner or later, finish the sentence. Sooner or later, everybody sees what they're doing. And everybody knows. And I don't want this to sound too terribly harsh, but if you're a gossip and you think people don't know what you are, yeah, they do. And if they don't now, shortly they will. Any comments? I have a question. Historically, in the course of my lifetime, we've had a hard time seeing it this way. You know, I mean, we certainly would not compare being a gossip to being a bank robber, that kind of thing. We just wouldn't do that. But when we look at these concepts and we think about the damage that is done by gossip, we tend to lean on this dainty morsels. The gossip has these dainty morsels, interesting things. Now, for just a second, think about dainty morsels. We mentioned chocolate eclairs, ice cream, cookie, donuts, and the list goes on and on. Do we all know that these things can kill us? Anybody know how many calories are in a chocolate mocha? Is that how many? Somebody checks, huh? We know these things. How many of us really already know that if you eat too much fat, it'll clog your system and kill you? How many of us know if you eat too much sugar, that's really not good for your body? How many of us know that take in way too many calories and that ain't good for you either? All right, everything that the dainty morsel has in it, we know what it can lead to eventually. Do we eat it anyway? Yes, we do. If gossip seems like a dainty morsel, we know these things are true about it, but dainty morsels you eat anyway. You participate in it. So what's the key to it?
Abstain from it.
Well, with reasonable adults, when we get to thinking about the dainty morsels, does there come a time when you say, no, I can't do that? With sane, reasonable adults, does that happen? Yeah. Use my father as an illustration. My father never a day in his life gave a thought to whether or not his food was healthy. Not even once. And if you suggested he might ought to think about it, he'd laugh you off. Oh, everybody knows white bread's good for you or they wouldn't have invented it. That kind of thing. Until they said, Mr. Young, you have pancreatic cancer. And all of a sudden, attitude changed. What we're getting at is this, with the dainty morsels, you know, if we were talking about the gossip, the time comes, the day comes when the attitude has to change. And we say we're not going to do it and we're not going to listen to it and be entertained by it. All right, let's go to chapter 27. Yes.
I think one of the things we as Christians even have a problem with is we can say we can tell a story, but we don't think about it as being hatred toward our brother.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to label it that way. And I think James does the same thing over in chapter 4. When he talks about quarrels and fighting and tearing each other down, he calls it murder.
Yeah.
None of us would do that if we thought we were murdering anybody.
Y-
We don't want to put the harsher terms on it because they make us stop.
One of the terms that I really have come to dislike over the years is it's just. I'm not doing that. I'm just doing this. Minimize something. It can be horribly damaging, but I will frame it in a way where my actions are minimized and therefore I'm okay. It's not really hatred. It's not really murder. We sometimes laugh at people in the world who seem to, their intentions were good. As long as my intentions are good, it doesn't matter. If my intentions are good, do I say, I spoke in a hateful way about my brother and damaged them, but my intentions were good? Yes.
It's related to teasing as well, because you can hear it right in front of your face.
I detect there may be something behind that comment. That's okay. This happens a lot in families. Do we tease each other sometimes when we shouldn't? Yes. Go over the top and it's okay because it's my family. And until somebody actually breaks down into tears, what are you so upset about? That kind of thing. All right, so much for the gossip. Change subjects. Chapter 27. Forget the lesson sheet. We're kind of hurrying through to get to the next course of study. And by the way, when we finish Proverbs, the first minor prophet that we're going to be going into, Kyle will be taking the class in here. It'll be the book of Haggai. And he asked me to ask you all to have read Haggai, all one page of it, before we get into that. Okay? Not that big of an assignment, Haggai. So now we're in Proverbs 27, and if somebody says, if you're hurrying through it, what are you going to do? What we would like to do in chapter 27, a word that is used repeatedly in the 27th chapter, it's the word friends. So we're going to talk about chapter 27 in light of the concept of who our friends are. And there are there are 4 verses on that I'd like us to look at. The first is 27 and verse 6. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. Well-known proverb. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Somebody want to give me about a paragraph of explanation on that so I don't have to do all the talking? What's that mean? Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Brian? Is a friend somebody who tells you what he thinks you want to hear, or he tells you what he knows you need to hear? Okay, this is a well-known concept. When we talk about what a real friend is, my friend will tell me the bad and the ugly. My friend will tell me the things that he knows have the possibility of hurting me, but he knows I need to hear them. Can somebody give me a New Testament example where somebody, for the benefit of somebody else, told them things that they didn't want to hear? Bill?
Paul represented Peter for meeting the Gentiles and the Jews came.
Yeah. Galatians chapter. Matter of fact, the whole book of Galatians is an example of what we're talking about here. Galatians chapter 2, Paul got in Peter's face and said, hey, you're a Jew acting like a Gentile, so how come you're turning around and trying to compel Gentiles to act like Jews? And with the context behind that, makes much more sense. But that was Peter. Got in his face and told him what he needed to hear. Galatians 4 and verse 16, very famous passage in this regard. Am I become your enemy because I told you the truth? Now, this is simple, this part. Okay, guys, how many times have your wife, let me rephrase that. Has your wife ever told you something you didn't want to hear, but in your heart, after reflection, you knew she needed to tell you? And it was for your betterment? Am I the only guy? Oh yeah, it's too many times it's saying don't raise your hand. Is that it? Well, honestly, the example I can think of on this is most men, somewhere along the line, they realize sometimes my wife tells me some things that I don't want to hear. But sometimes I have to hear. Well, let's flip that around. Women, have your husband ever told you anything that you didn't want to hear, but you knew you needed to? All right, guys, don't rub that in, okay? Let that one go. Your friend is somebody who will tell you what's going to be in your best interest. Now, there's another one. Well, before we get there, forgot. When they tell you, is it always subtle?
No.
Yes or no? Does it have to be subtle?
No.
How many? Don't raise your hand for this one either. How many of you guys would not have listened to your wife had she been terribly subtle? Sometimes it doesn't work that way. When Peter told the Lord, Matthew chapter 16, Peter makes the great confession. Yeah, Jesus, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Good boy, Peter, that's great stuff. And then before 5 verses go by, Jesus is talking about death and resurrection. Peter said, Lord, this isn't going to happen to you. And what did Jesus tell him? Get behind me, Satan. That wasn't particularly subtle or soft. Sometimes there are things that you just have to hear. Now in chapter 27, let's look at verse 9. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, so a man's counsel is sweet to his friend. Here's a question. If somebody were asking you the question, who are your real friends? We say, okay, my friend's real friend's somebody that will tell me what I don't want to hear because he knows I need to hear it. What else would you put on that list? Who's your real friend? The one you call for advice. The one whose counsel you value. That's your friend. If I got a problem and it's a real problem, I want to talk to this guy about it. That's who my friend is. Now, if that's the case, what had you better hope about that person? Better hope he's not a fool. We've already talked about that. But realistically speaking, if you talk about who the real friends are, somebody will tell you what you need to hear, and it's somebody you want to listen to, even if they're telling you something you might not want to hear. Now let's look at verse 10. Do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend, and do not go to your brother's house in the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother far away. Now, it's possible to kind of look at this a couple different ways and break it down into pieces. The first clause, do not forsake your own friend or your father's friend. Be loyal to your friends. And that's a valid lesson in and of itself, but that's not all the verse. Do not go to your brother's house on the day of your calamity. Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far away. The real point here, near versus far. What's the advice? If you got a good friend who's close to you, whose counsel you trust, who will tell you what you need to hear, but I got a real problem. My brother lives 1,000 miles from here. I'm going to take a trip across the country and see him.
No.
Is that really all that smart?
No.
Really what we're getting at here is these real friends of yours, lean on them in your calamities. Now one more. By the way, do you need people like that in your life? What if I take the attitude, you know what? Friends eventually create problems for me. Don't want to get too close to people, because that opens the door for pain. Now, from a certain weird point of view, could that be true? It's like if I say, I really don't want to have kids because with kids come heartache. Is that true? That's true. But do I want kids? Yeah, I do. Do I want friends? There are some things that even though you know it's an investment, it's an expensive investment. And realistically, if you talk about marriage, a woman marries a man. Is there a likelihood that there's going to be some junk she's going to have to learn to deal with in the course of her life? Is it an investment? Yeah, it's an investment. There is a price to be paid in hopes that the relationship overall will be pleasing to everybody. Is it the same thing with friends? You invest in friends in the hopes that it works out good. But the truth of the matter is people definitely need friends. Now the 14th verse, chapter 27. This is the one we find humorous because we get this visual. He who blesses his friend with a loud voice early in the morning, it will be reckoned a curse to him. We like that one. We picture that. Some guy's up at 4 o'clock in the morning shouting, may blessings be upon your head, and he wakes you up. What's the first thing you think? Couldn't that have waited till about 8 in the morning? Simple idea. If you want to keep your friends, don't be an annoyance. Don't do silly, annoying things that antagonize people when you don't have to. Now, just 4 simple statements about friends in this chapter. Friend tells me what I need to hear. I want his counsel, even if he's telling me something that I don't want to hear. I lean on them at times of calamity, and I don't go out of my way to annoy them. Comments? Pardon me? Did I miss one? In my translation, iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. I thought about that, and it definitely is talking about friends. Well, it doesn't have to be talking about friends, but it didn't use the word friend. Read it in your translation.
As iron
Okay. And what do we get from that? Iron sharpens iron. A man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Pardon me?
The same as verse 6.
The same as 6. He tells me the bad.
The wounds of a friend, the faithful are the wounds of a friend.
Yeah. Here, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Well, I'm trying not to, I'm learning. I'm closing in on 70, and by 90 I might learn not to interrupt people. When you think about that passage we just read, do friends have a good effect on each other? Iron sharpens iron, the man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Your friend is somebody that when you're around that person, you're better. They make you better. And again, if you talk about the things that are valuable and who do I count as a friend, my friends need to be the ones who make me a better person as opposed to a worse person. All right, there are a couple individual ideas from this chapter I want to stop and take a look at for a moment. Verse 21. These are just because I liked them. Verse 21, the crucible is for silver and the furnace for gold, and each is tested by the praise according him. We're talking about the way a person reacts to praise. Now, if we talk about silver and gold, if you smelt silver and gold or put them in the fire, what does it do to them? Melts them, burns out the impurities, makes it apparent, the true nature of the metal that you're talking about. You see the value when you smelt it. Is praise like that? You can tell a lot about a person by the way he handles praise. Illustration. Okay, I'm standing here teaching, and somebody raises his hand and says, I have a comment to make. Scott, I think you're the finest preacher in the world since the Apostle Paul.
And his head gets bigger and bigger.
How am I going to react to that? How should I react to that? I have just been praised to high heaven. What are possible reactions to it? You're probably stunned that I could even think of such a thing, huh? Okay. Is it possible that I could hear that and become swell-headed and obnoxious? Oh, that's the A reaction. A reaction. Oh, I receive praise like that and I become obnoxious. Well, if I'm the greatest preacher on the face of the world since the Apostle Paul, I better get some respect around here and money and power. All of that. Is it possible to react that way? Do people sometimes react that way to praise? Yes. Proper reaction. Okay, now we have an example of praise that was obviously over the top. If somebody had said that to you, you're the greatest whatever since, whoever. Greatest whatever since whoever. What might be the appropriate reaction? What would go through your head? Oh, what's he want? Grab your wallet. Okay. What is the motive of this person? And I question his motive because it is obvious to me, as it should be obvious to everybody, that what he said was what? Way over the top. I mean, even if there's an element of, somebody's doing a decent job, when you get this way over the top stuff, the first thing you think, well, okay, what's his motive? Say his motive is, say it was my mother. Somebody over the top. Was it Mom that said it? Now, My mother wouldn't have said that. She might have thought it, but she wouldn't have said it. Was it my mother? Or realistically, when you talk about the praise, oh, this person, what I'm thinking is this person has a problem. There's a problem in this person's thought processes. They are not a realistic person. When you boil it down, if we talk about reaction to praise, it tells a lot about you. How do you handle praise? If you're the type that gets praised and it makes you worse, it tells something about you. If we flipped it, is it possible for a person to receive praise and to go in the other direction in a way that might not be good? Is it possible for a person to be too self-deprecating? Possible. But it's way more likely that this scenario should be. When we receive praise from people, we step back and we say, okay, just how valid is this? And as the Apostle Paul said, I'm writing these things so that you might learn not to think of men above that which is proper. Yes?
They could say it to be sarcastic.
Yes, they could. Matter of fact, I said it to be sarcastic, to tell you the truth. Some of these things, it could be to stir up trouble. But again, simple idea. How you receive praise tells a lot about you. If you buy into the sarcasm, it says something about you. It's, what's the term, don't believe the hype? All right, let's go to verse 23. 23 through 27. This is another one of my, boy, this sounds like something young people ought to know. 23, know well the condition of your flocks and pay attention to your herds. For riches are not forever, nor does a crown endure to all generations. When the grass disappears, the new growth is seen, and the herbs of the mountains are gathered in. The lambs will be for your clothing, the goats will bring the price of a field. And there will be goat's milk enough for your food, and food for your household, and sustenance for your maidens. All right, young person passage. Is it teaching greed? Well, if it's not teaching greed, what's it teaching? Know well the condition of your flocks and pay attention to your herds. What's it teaching? Good stewardship. Take care of your money and manage what you have and pay attention to it. Be diligent and watch and manage your stuff. Finish this sentence. If I don't watch my money, somebody else will. That's the way it is. When you look at verse 24, for riches are not forever. Do young people sometimes have the tendency when things are going good that they just can't imagine that it could ever change?
All people can do that.
Yeah, even older people can. Seems to be a problem with the young, but what you learn when you've been in the world a few years, it always changes. It's just a question of how long will it be between the waves. So, if you're a young person and we're just talking about what do you do with money, what do you do with your business, what do you do with your job, you keep your eyes on it and you watch it and you manage it. You pay attention to your herd, you pay attention to your business, not because you're greedy, but you're rooting for the future. And you're taking care of yourself with God's blessing in this world. Any comments on that? Next week we will pick up with chapter 28, and as we go into chapter 28, the word you are looking for is the word poor. We are talking about the poor in chapter 28, and we'll pick up there next week. I don't know yet. Maybe. I will try to. I've been tardy on the lesson sheets.